Hey friends, we're back with American Miscellany. We're on essay number 125, and it's all about Lindley Murray. Before we get into that, I'd just, love to remind you about this lovely old book that we're reading here, American Miscellany, published in 1865. Our previous essay number 124, was all about the old City Hall in New York. Unfortunately, we don't have an engraving to accompany this essay, but let's get through it. We're here on page 300 of American Miscellany, and let's get into essay number 125. Lindley Murray. Lindley Murray, the Prince of English Grammarians, was an American. He was born in the memorable year 1745 at Swetara, near Lancaster, in the state of Pennsylvania. His father was an active and enterprising person, very anxious to improve his circumstances and to raise his family to independence. While he was following the occupation of a miller, he thought of devoting his attention to some other branch of business, and began trading to the West Indies, to which he made several successful voyages. Latterly, he became an extensive ship owner and engaged in a great variety of mercantile pursuits, by which he amassed a considerable fortune. To his mother, an amiable and clever woman, young Murray owed much, and he was sensible of it. He held her in great esteem, and cherished toward her the feeling of a most affectionate and devoted son. Both his parents were members of the Society of Friends, and they were pious and exemplary persons. The Bible was read daily in the family, and one of the first things which made a strong impression on his mind was seeing his father shedding tears as he sat in a corner of the room perusing by himself the sacred page. This may appear to some a trifling incident, but such was its influence upon the mind of Lindley Murray that he continued to refer to it with gratitude and gladness to the end of his days. Lindley was the eldest of 12 children. In his infancy, he was very delicate. He was playful and frolicsome, however, and being weak and sickly, he was greatly indulged, especially by his grandmother, who lived in the family. Indeed, he was, in every sense of the term, a spoiled child, and, as was to be expected, became very peevish and obstinate. He was full of mischief and tricks, some of which indicated anything but an amiable disposition, and he was not corrected. He became so forward and ungovernable that it was found necessary to remove him from the observation of his indulgent grandmother and place him under the care of an aunt. She was a woman of great kindness as well as firmness of character, and it was not long till the wayward, mischievous boy found that he was under a very different kind of training from that to which he had formerly been subjected. To this discreet and excellent relative he was much indebted, and in after life he frequently confessed that to her wise and salutary management he owed a great measure his future eminence. When about 7 years of age, he was sent to the city of Philadelphia, that he might have the benefit of a better education than could be had at Swetara. But he was not long at the Academy of Philadelphia till he removed with his parents to North Carolina. Their residence there was temporary, and in 1753 they settled at New York. Lindley was sent to one of the best seminaries in the city, and every attention was paid to his education by his parents and teacher. Notwithstanding his fondness for play, he scarcely ever neglected to perform the tasks which were prescribed to him, and he did so to the satisfaction of his teacher. He made great progress in his education and gained a reputation for talent and scholarship. From school, young Murray was removed at a very early age to the counting house of his father, who was most desirous that his son should follow the mercantile profession, though all his efforts and solicitations to this effect failed. Lindley had no relish for it, and would be anything but a merchant. His father persevered in his purpose. He was a severe disciplinarian, and went the length of compelling him to enter on an employment which was most uncongenial to his wishes. This, together with certain family regulations, appeared to him so unreasonable that he resolved to withdraw from the counting house and the parental roof, and begin the world for himself. After having received a severe chastisement from his father, he packed up his books and any little property he possessed, and set out for a town in the interior of the country, where there was an excellent seminary. Being respectably connected, he was received into the establishment as a boarder. While here he prosecuted I guess that makes sense. While here he prosecuted his studies with great ardor, and would have been perfectly happy but for the sorrow which he thought his absence would occasion his mother. That absence, however, was of short duration. He had a particular friend at Philadelphia, a youth about his own age, to whom he paid a visit. When about to leave the city, he met a gentleman who had dined at his father's a short time before, who asked him how long he expected to remain. He said he was just setting off. The gentleman had just been with a letter to the post office, but was too late, and it being about business of great importance, he requested him to deliver it with his own hand as soon as he arrived at New York. Young Murray was taken by surprise. He could not muster sufficient courage to state to him his situation, and took charge of the letter. At first he thought of putting it into the post office, but having engaged to deliver it personally, he could not think of breaking his word. He hurried on to New York, and delivered the letter, expecting to return immediately, but the boat which crossed the bay did not sail till next morning, and he had to remain over the night. Though he had conducted his business with great caution, he was perceived by some person who knew him. An uncle visited him, who urged him strongly to go home, telling him at the same time of the distress of his mother on his account. After some remonstrance, he agreed to call upon her. She received him affectionately, and during the interview his father came in. He saluted him tenderly, expressed great satisfaction at seeing him again, and they spent the evening together in great harmony and affection. A person was dispatched next day to the place of his retreat, to settle all accounts and bring back his property. Thus the boy's folly was happily terminated, and his father's fireside was dearer to him than ever. Till his death he referred with sorrow to the folly of which he was guilty in leaving his home, and likewise with gratitude to the manner in which he was brought back. In one of his letters he says, "When I reflect on this rash and imprudent adventure, on the miseries in which it might have involved me, and on the singular manner in which I was restored to the bosom of my family, I cannot avoid seeing the hand of divine providence in my preservation, and feeling that I ought to be humbly and deeply thankful for the gracious interposition." Shortly after his return to New York, he solicited the privilege of a private tutor to aid him in his studies, with which request his father kindly complied. The gentleman appointed was learned and talented, and most attentive to his charge. Lindley commenced and prosecuted his studies with diligence and alacrity. He rose early and sat up late. This close application, however, proved too much for a constitution naturally delicate. The incessant study and confinement injured his health, and he was obliged for a time to abate the ardor of his pursuits, and to join bodily exercise with mental application. When under the superintendence of this learned and faithful preceptor, he was very gay and frolicsome, and was led, it appears, into many follies and transgressions. Of a gay and frolicsome sort, I guess. But he had a high veneration for those who were truly religious, and for all books that inculcated morality and virtue. Even at this period, though not decidedly the subject of religious impressions, he had a great esteem for Christianity. Some of his intimate acquaintances were skeptics and deists, but all the arguments which they advanced, and all the infidel publications which they put into his hands, never disturbed his mind or led him to doubt the divine origin of the Christian religion. When between 17 and 18 years of age, he became so attached to literary pursuits that the counting house had no charms for him. To follow his father's business, to become a merchant, he would not consent. It seemed to him a most uninteresting and unintellectual employment. He communicated his wishes to his father, and expressed his intention to follow the legal profession, but his proposal was strongly objected to. His father reminded him of its temptations, of the small return it would yield him compared with what he would receive if he became a merchant, and the anxiety he felt that he should assist him in his mercantile pursuits. But all argument and persuasion failed. He was determined to follow a literary profession, though in his father's estimation it was neither so lucrative nor so honorable as that of a merchant. The office in which Murray was placed to acquire a knowledge of the law was one of the best which could be had in the city of New York. The principal was Benjamin Rissom, Esquire, an intimate friend of his father, a man of great integrity and eminence in his profession. John J. Esquire, afterward governor of New York, was his fellow student, a young man who then gave indications of talent and excellence. With these advantages, he prosecuted his studies with zeal and alacrity, and at the close of the 4th year he was called to the bar and received license to practice as both counsel and attorney, according to the custom of that time. His success exceeded his expectations, and at the age of 22 he married a young woman of personal attractions, good sense, and a most amiable disposition, and of a worthy and respectable family. Shortly after his marriage, his father's business required him to go to England and to remain for a time in that country. Circumstances connected with his own profession rendered it necessary for him to go there likewise. In 1771, they returned to New York, where he resumed the practice of law. He was exceedingly attentive and laborious, and was generally esteemed for his professional knowledge as well as his private worth. He never encouraged litigation, even when he saw it to be for his own pecuniary advantage. He uniformly recommended a settlement of differences by arbitration, and never in the whole course of his practice did he undertake a cause above the justice of which he had a doubt, or advocate the claims of an individual with which he thought unreasonable. He gained for himself the reputation of an honest lawyer, and in consequence of his integrity as well as his ability, he acquired grand celebrity and enjoyed for many years great success. But there is a tide in the affairs of men. Like others, he had only his day. About this time, the troubles in the colonies commenced, which were followed by a general failure of proceedings in the law courts of this country. This circumstance, together with a severe illness which impaired his health, induced him to relinquish the profession of the law and retire for a time into the country. He went to Islip in Long Island, about 40 miles from New York, where he remained 4 years. They were the idlest and most unprofitable years of his life, and to his death he spoke of them with regret and with unqualified condemnation. He then returned to New York and began business as a merchant. His father gave him unlimited credit in the importation of goods from England, and by perseverance and a grand command of capital, he succeeded beyond his most sanguine expectations. Daddy's money makes it so easy, eh? He became every year more prosperous. What do you know? And about the time when the question of American independence was settled, he retired from business and purchased a delightful country seat, about 3 miles from the city, where he expected to pass the remainder of his days. But how soon are our hopes blasted! Before he could leave New York and settle at Bellevue, the name of his new abode, he was seized with a most alarming illness, which left him in a very infirm and debilitated state. As soon as his health would permit, he repaired to the spot where, to use his own words, he promised himself every enjoyment which his heart desired. But the fine mansion and the noble river on which it stood, and the pleasant country on the opposite shore, and the elegant furniture, and the beautiful garden, and the verdant lawns on which the cattle grazed, yielded him but little comfort. His health declined. Every year he felt himself weaker, and his friends and himself feared that death would soon terminate his earthly existence. To remove, if possible, his complaint and to restore his health, he was recommended to a change of scene and to leave for a time his delightful retreat. He went first to Bristol in Pennsylvania, then to the celebrated mineral springs in the mountains of New Jersey, and latterly to Bethlehem, a town about 50 miles from Philadelphia. But he was little benefited by all these wanderings, and his father, who accompanied him, having been seized with sudden and severe indisposition, they instantly bent their course homeward. Though Mr. Murray's health was not much improved by his summer's excursion, it was not altogether fruitless in good. He found that he was generally best when the weather was cold, that Bellevue was too secluded, and that the atmosphere was not sufficiently bracing. In these circumstances, he was advised by his physicians to try the effect of a change of climate, and Yorkshire in England was fixed upon as the place of his retreat. Having made certain arrangements, he embarked with his wife in the close of the year 1784 and reached that country in safety. When he left America, he thought it would only be for a short season, and that he would soon return to his own country and spend the remainder of his days with his early friends. 2 years was the utmost he had assigned for his absence. But how short-sighted in man, and how very little does he know of the future. He never was able to return. His health was never restored. Indeed, he never left the village in Yorkshire which he fixed upon as a temporary residence. He lived there as an invalid for the long period of 42 years. It was not still the period of his residence in England that he became an author. Though he was confined to the house almost the whole of that time by bodily indisposition, his mind was active and vigorous. To prevent that tedium and irritability which bodily infirmity generally occasions, and also with the view of being useful to others, he wrote and published a work entitled The Power of Religion on the Mind. It appears anonymously, and his object in it appeared anonymously, and his object in publishing it was purely benevolent. He distributed 500 copies gratis among the inhabitants of York and its vicinity. The publication was well received. When it reached the 6th edition, he enlarged the work and put his name to it. After this, he disposed of the copyright without any pecuniary recompense to an influential bookseller in London, and under his auspices it gained extensive circulation. As he never contemplated any pecuniary advantage by this publication, but simply the benefit of others, it was peculiarly gratifying to him to receive from various quarters testimonies of approbation and assurances of the advantage which had been derived from its perusal. This was to him the source of great delight. Often did he express his thankfulness to the author of his being, that he had been the instrument, even in a small degree, of disseminating excitements to a pious and virtuous course of life. His second publication was his Grammar of the English Language. This work, which had gained such celebrity, was completed in less than a year. It was commenced in the spring of 1794 and published in the spring of 1795. He was induced to write it by some of his friends who had established a school for young females in York. The first teachers were but indifferently qualified in this respect. These young persons he kindly instructed in this particular branch of education at his own house, and afterward, chiefly at their request, published the grammar. He never designed it to be used beyond this school, but it soon found its way to other seminaries. It became in a short time a standard book, and for several years now, new editions of from 10,000 to 12,000 were published. The number of copies sold of the abridgment of the grammar, which appeared in 1795, has been many millions. The great success which attended these publications, together with the beneficial influence it had upon his mind, induced him to publish several other works. In the year that he published abridgment of the grammar, he published Exercises and Key. Shortly after, there appeared The English Reader, the Introduction to the Reader, which works which soon obtained an extensive circulation in the schools of Britain as well as America. Between the years 1802 and 1807, he published 2 French volumes and a spelling book for the use of schools. In addition to these works, for which he is chiefly celebrated, he wrote a short treatise on the duty and benefit of a daily perusal of the Holy Scriptures, and edited a selection from Bishop Horne's commentary on the Psalms. The copyrights of all these works were sold to one of the first publishing houses in London, with the exception of the duty and benefit of a daily perusal of the Holy Scriptures and the Power of Religion, which were presented to the booksellers without any pecuniary compensation. The sum which he received for the whole scarcely amounted to £3,000. The price was considered liberal by both the author and the publisher, and Mr. Murray often expressed his delight that the copyrights had proved advantageous to the gentleman in Paternoster Row, who had made the purchase of them. As far as he himself was concerned, it made no difference, for his views in writing and publishing were never mercenary, his sole aim being to benefit others, the young in particular. The profits of his valuable publications he never applied to his own private use, but to charitable purposes, and it was to him the source of the purest satisfaction that, while he was the means of doing much for the education of the young, he was at the same time enabled to give a considerable sum to religions and benevolent institutions. It is a singular fact that Dr. Murray should have written all these works when he was an invalid. During the 42 years he spent in England, he could take little exercise, with the exception of a drive in his carriage, or being drawn about his garden in a chair constructed for that purpose. For the last 16 years of his life he was entirely confined to his room, and yet his mind was hale and vigorous. He was a hard student, and when his wife or his friends expressed their apprehension that his close application might prove injurious to him, he would pleasantly say, "It is better to wear away than to rust away." Not later than 8 o'clock, summer and winter, he was rolled in a chair from his bedroom to his study, where he spent the day in writing, reading the Scriptures, and religious meditation. Never was a murmur heard to escape his lips. So far from this being the case, he was uniformly pleased, frequently cheerful, and always resigned. He often referred to the kindness of God in preserving his mental faculties, and in giving him such an amount of temporal wealth as made him comfortable and independent, in blessing him with such an affectionate and beloved wife, and in the prospect which he had of a glorious immortality when life's journey closed. These were some of the things which cheered the heart of this excellent man during the period of his long confinement. It is a singular circumstance also that his mental powers should have continued unimpaired to the very last. When fully 80 years, his mind was as vigorous as ever, and he was fully better than he had been for some years previous. And what was not less singular, his hearing was good, his memory was uncommonly retentive, and his sight was so little injured that he could read the smallest print without the aid of spectacles. But the longest life must close, and the most useful man must bid adieu to the present scene. On the 10th of January, 1826, he was seized with a slight paralytic affection in his left hand, which was of short duration. On the 13th of February, he had a return of the same malady, which, by the use of means, was for a time mitigated. In the evening, he was seized with acute pain, accompanied with violent sickness, and all attempts to afford relief proved ineffectual. It was death, and no human skill could avert the stroke. He bore the pain, which was excessive, with great meekness and fortitude. And on the 16th of February he expired. He was interred on the 22nd of the same month in the burying ground of the Quakers in the city of York, in the presence of a large assembly where his remains lie, far from friend and fatherland, till the resurrection of the blessed. Such is a brief sketch of Lindley Murray, the grammarian, and we must add the philanthropist and the Christian. His endowments, intellectual and moral, were of a superior order, and few men have left behind them a higher reputation for wisdom, piety, and benevolence. His writings are a standing memorial of his literacy and intellectual qualifications, and his conduct in all the relations of life testified that he was a virtuous, generous, and noble-minded man. He was modest and humble, free from everything like literary egotism or pharisaical boasting. He was a warm friend to the poor, and he took a deep interest in all religious and charitable institutions. In his will, after making provisions for his beloved and affectionate Hannah, and giving certain legacies to a number of relatives and friends, he left £25 each to 7 different establishments at York, £2,000 to the British and Foreign Bible Society, and £200 to the African Institution. He directed that the residue of his property after the decease of his wife should be devoted to pious and benevolent uses. Mr. Murray was a member of the Society of Friends. He, as might be expected, was much esteemed by them, and they greatly mourned his loss. He was one of their brightest ornaments. But though attached to that highly respectable body of Christians, he was not a bigot. He had a great respect for religious persons of every name, and used his influence to heal the breaches which unhappily exist in the Christian churches. He loved the brotherhood, and he longed for the day when Christians would be of one mind. His testimony on this point is so excellent and so necessary to be remembered in these latter days that we must give it at length. We are long in learning to judge wisely of one another, and to make charitable allowances for differences of understanding, disposition, education, etc. Mankind are all brethren, the children of one Father. They should, therefore, when we believe them to be sincere and upright, be received as fellow partakers of the same privileges. I respect piety and virtue wherever I meet them. It would be a proof of my own superficiality or depravity if I valued a true religious man the less for the name and the profession which he sustains. I trust that I shall ever be influenced by the cheering sentiment that every man who sincerely loves God and works righteousness is accepted by him, and is entitled to universal esteem and regard. We have seen a portrait of this interesting and estimable man. He had a noble, a majestic look. He was tall, well-proportioned, and rather stout. He had an open, cheerful countenance, with a forehead somewhat elevated. His complexion was dark. Though long confined to the house, he was not sickly-looking, but ruddy. His hair, toward the close of life, became perfectly white, and his whole appearance was dignified and prepossessing. A stranger in his presence felt a mingled sensation of admiration, reverence, and love, and often the remark was made that he realized our conceptions of the apostles and holy men who, in the early ages of Christianity, dedicated themselves to the service of God in advancing the religion of his Son.